Hello everyone. A few weeks ago I saw a tag. I think it was called decks of cards I use in readings for other people. I'll see if I can find the link to it. So I thought it would be fun to share with you some of the decks that I use when I do readings for other people. A lot of what I noticed after going through my decks to pick the decks out is that I usually tend to read with Rider-Waite-Smith clones. This one, the Everyday Tarot by Biddy Tarot, is one of the main ones that I use. I really like reading with this deck. I feel like reading for other people with this deck, I feel like the messages are very clear for me. I really like the directionality of the cards. The simple color palette also helps me just get down to the message, the main message. Something else that I like about this deck is that it's very small, so it's nice for me and easy for me to shuffle, but it's also small enough to fit a lot of cards. Sorry, I have all of the other decks here. Small enough to fit a lot of cards into a small space. So if I'm using a large spread for a reading, this deck is really great for that. So that's the Everyday Tarot. This is my go-to deck for reading for other people. And then another deck that I also tend to gravitate towards is the Light Seers Tarot by Chris Ann. And this one, it's a Rider-Waite-Smith based deck. It's not a clone, but I would say it's closer to, it definitely follows a Rider-Waite-Smith symbolism, and the images, once you see them, they're pretty recognizable. But I also feel like this deck is really good for reading for others. With this one, I don't use so much the directionality, but I really like the different colors that are included, which can give you messages for the querent. I also like the facial expressions in the people here in the cards. I noticed that, let me see if there's this there's something that connects the cards. It's like this little, like a thread of white dots that I've noticed sometimes. And sometimes the cards, they get they align really well, so that the there's like just this energy that moves through them. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying, or if you have this deck and you have seen that. But I remember I was doing a reading once, and all the cards had this like movement of white dots, something like this, but they were all connected. And that was something that I had not noticed before, and I noticed it in that moment in that reading. So then that went into my message as well. It gave me additional information for that particular reading. I really do like the different take on some of the cards. For example, the Eight of Swords. Since the images are a little more modern, I feel like we can relate to them easier. Like if somebody gets a reading from me and they see these cards, they might connect more to the message and the images on the cards than they might if I do a reading with like the Centennial Rider-Waite. So that is the Light Seers Tarot. Another good deck for me to use in reading for other people. I think one of the reasons why I gravitate towards the Rider-Waite-Smith themed decks for reading for other people is because that's the system that I learned tarot with. And so if I use something that was completely different, I feel like I would have to refer to the book a lot, and I don't want to be doing that in my reading, especially because the readings I do, I audio record them. So I will pull the cards and I do take some notes, but then I speak my way through the reading, and I allow things to just kind of flow as I'm looking at the cards and tuning into the question that was asked. So stopping to read a book is not something that I want to be doing in the middle of a reading. So this one is the next deck I'm showing you is the Modern Witch Tarot by Lisa Sturley. And I just used this one yesterday for a reading. I have a reading that's specific for people who are creative. So somebody purchased it from my Etsy, and those are some of my favorite readings to do for people. So this one is a modern take on the Rider-Waite-Smith. So the images are very similar to the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith. Some things do change, like the gender, the clothing, the color. So those are additional things that can give you information, but I feel comfortable reading for someone else with this deck and tuning in to the message and tuning into my intuition. And similar to the Lightseers Tarot, I think the different modern images with people of different skin colors and different body sizes is really good for someone who gets a reading, because you can just connect to the image a little better than with something more traditional or more antique or vintage or old, like the Rider-Waite-Smith, the original one. Something about this deck that sometimes I don't like so much is that there's a lot of feminine energy, even for the King of Swords. The cards that are traditionally male tend to be female. So in that sense, I feel like there's maybe like an imbalance here with this deck that I take into account when I read, especially if court cards come up. And as I'm sharing that, my mind is asking me like, well, what even is gender, you know? But that's something that I do consider, and I mentioned if I'm reading for someone, and for example, the King of Swords comes out and the image is not a male who is traditionally the king, how does that affect the message that you're delivering? So I really like this deck, actually. I really like the reimagination of the Rider-Waite-Smith, and I really like the different colors. See, this is another image, the Emperor, although this person looks pretty androgynous in my opinion, but there's something about it that's also very feminine. Yeah. So I'm curious about this idea of gender in this deck especially. So I'll write down some of my thoughts, and maybe I can do another video, like a follow-up, to expand on that. So this is the Modern Witch Tarot. And up next is another Rider-Waite-Smith clone deck. I really love the Kitty Kahane Tarot. This one, I have the German edition, and this one I use exclusively for my storytelling readings. So in a storytelling reading, there's no question that is asked. It's just connecting to the energy of the querent, and then pulling up some cards, and then letting the cards tell a story. And there's something about this deck that is really good for that kind of storytelling. It could be that the characters are not traditional human looking, and that the colors are so bright and imaginative that they just put you into this like storytelling mode or mood. I really also like the directionality of them. So the Kitty Kahane is one that I use. Well, I use it sometimes for personal readings, but for the storytelling reading, this is the one that I will use. Yeah, so very Rider-Waite-Smith, but with a twist. Some of the cards are coming up upside down. And sometimes these ones, they also have that like connecting color. So because even though they're like a strange color palette, it's still kind of a limited color palette, so you can use the colors to get a message as well. And so I have the German version, so the guidebook is in German. And sometimes I will use Google Lens to translate, but just out of curiosity. But when I do the readings, I don't really look at the book, or sometimes I don't even look at the traditional card meanings. It's just like the story that the cards are telling. So that is the Kitty Kahane Tarot, which I use for my storytelling readings. And then I also brought out these two Rider-Waite-Smith versions. This one is the Morgan Greer. And this one, oh, maybe I shouldn't bring them out together. So I also do like using this one to read for others for the same reason as I've mentioned. I know the system, and I feel like it's easy for me to get messages from the images, even though the coloring is also different. And I do feel like there's more directionality like in the way that the court cards and some of the people cards are facing. I feel like at least the King of Rods, I feel like in the Rider-Waite-Smith, he's usually facing forward. I also really like that this one is borderless, and since I have small hands, small decks are my favorite, just because it's easier to shuffle them. Yeah, so this one is a really beautiful deck. And I really like just the brightness of it. I feel like the Rider-Waite-Smith can be really muted, but this one is super bright. And so I'm going to show you one of the muted Rider-Waite-Smiths that I have. I have another one that was my very first tarot deck, and I don't use it for reading for other people. That one's my, it's like a special deck that I keep. But this one would be one of my favorite versions of the Rider-Waite-Smith also, because it has this vintage feeling to it. I like that it's small, and I like that the colors are kind of faded. Sometimes you're just in the mood for that vintage and old aged look. So I will often read with this one for other people as well. I know there's other Rider-Waite-Smith decks. I didn't bring them out, but I have those that are colored, like the black and red and the Cosmic Rider-Waite-Smith, that have the same color throughout the cards, and then the images are just either white or black, depending on the color you chose. So I don't think I've used those for readings for other people, but I could use those. So anything Rider-Waite-Smith is okay for me to use in reading for other people. A long time ago, I had the Albano, I think it's Albano Waite deck on my list. I never got around to buying it, but I really liked the coloring of the images because they were very different from the Radiant Rider-Waite-Smith. which was my very first tarot deck. And then my last two that I will share with you is the Earth Crafters Tarot. And this one is an odd one for me because it's not a Rider-Waite-Smith based deck, but I find that I was able to, I used it a few times for a reading for a specific person, and I was able to connect easily with the messages of the plants and the images, in addition to my knowledge of what that card meant. So I have used this one in readings for other people. I would say that I don't use it super often, but for that specific person, I felt like I should use it. But it's not one that I will pull out often. And sometimes, I don't know how you choose your decks for reading for people. I have my go-tos, but sometimes as I'm preparing to do the reading, if a particular deck comes to mind, I will see if there's like a reason why maybe that deck wants to be used. This one, even though the images can be different than the Rider-Waite-Smith, I think there's enough information in the images to get a message without looking at the book. But obviously, if you are really well versed in herbs, then you would know some of the magical and medicinal applications of the different herbs. But this one, the images are just really beautiful, and I think they communicate a lot. So this is another one that I have used in the past. And then the last one I'm going to show you is an oracle deck, and I usually do not use oracle decks to read for other people, but I do use the Sacred Creators Oracle for the readings for creatives. And just because it's such a motivating and uplifting deck, I will use it as an additional message for the person, and I will let them know that I will read from the book for this deck because it's just an additional message, and the guidebook is really awesome, and it has some great questions for you to reflect on. So I'll pull one of these cards and I'll read the description from the guidebook after having done the other tarot reading, and then I will integrate the message from this card into the reading, the larger reading that I just did for them. So I think this one is just like a nice little bonus message that I give to people. And yeah, so these are, I think these are all the ones I have used to read for others. If I find out that there's a few that I forgot, I might do a follow-up video, but for now these are the ones that I know I have used recently. And I hope you enjoyed this video. If you read for others and want to share the decks that you use for reading, why you gravitate towards those decks, I would love to see that video and let me know in the comments. Thank you.